Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are.
I'm Paris, and this is Chris.
Hello, Paris.
Hello, Chris. For episode 3, we read Wizard's First Rule by Terry Goodkind.
Not actually a terrible book, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, this was well written. I really liked the metaphors and similes used. Vocabulary was good.
Markedly different from Marked.
yeah, you could say that. This book is... I mean, just on another side of the planet from Marked.
Whereas last week was a struggle to read line by line to line, rather. This one, not particularly offensive.
No, I mean, I enjoyed. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed reading.
Glance.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading it. Like, it was a fun story to keep up with. You know, especially if you're already into fantasy novels. This is essentially your archetype fantasy novel as far as I'm concerned.
This was quite lengthier in comparison to the last two that we did, so clearly we're not afraid to tackle some larger things.
Yeah, I mean, Marked was like 200 pages?
300. It was 300. Overton Window was about 300 to 400.
This one was
820 pages.
So we've been putting ourselves through the ringer for Terrible Book Club.
I sat down with this book for most of yesterday. I sacrificed myself to the terrible book god.
You did. And your sacrifice paid off.
It did. You know, it was, like I said, it's not actually that terrible of a book. Yeah, there may be terrible aspects, though.
Yeah, it was recommended to us by a friend of yours.
Yeah, my friend TJ, who does listen to this sometimes, I believe.
Yep.
Recommended this to me on the basis of some things, but he did mention that it might not necessarily be as outright terrible as some of the other material we've dealt with so far. But this is only episode 3. We're still exploring sort of the outer reaches of Terrible Book Club, still feeling our way through the darkness here.
Yeah.
Trying to decide how we come at things and attack them. And this might be a little bit different of an episode 2 just because of the length of the whole thing. It was quite lengthy, so I don't think we can walk through the plot as linearly as we have before.
Yeah,
so we apologize for any jumping around here, but be prepared. I don't think we're going to keep many of the spoilers on the back burner, maybe a couple of them for dramatic effect, but we'll see how that plays out. Don't expect us to be super linear about any of this.
Yeah, and we're not going to be attacking the writing at all because I feel like it was quite good. I really did.
Well, not at all. We're going to be looking at some things. It's not
hot need, Chris.
Yeah, okay, well.
I mean, but seriously, though, I only spotted a handful of typos in an 820
Oh, you're talking about, the minutia of the writing.
Yeah, and I thought it was
still some things to talk about sort of the broader themes and how stuff is played out and presented and stuff like that. That's still part of the writing.
Yes, but I'm saying
you're talking about the mechanical bits.
Yes,
of the writing.
That was fine in this book, and I enjoy that because that's something that obviously bothers me, which we've all learned over the last few episodes.
Yeah, even though I once again sacrificed my Sunday, the Lord's Day, the terrible book god's day in this case.
Yeah, it's definitely a terrible.
It wasn't a bad way to spend a Sunday. I didn't have much else to do, obviously, but
yeah.
But here we are now. We were hoping to have a guest on this one in our friend TJ that recommended it to us, but stuff didn't exactly work out quite the right way.
Yeah, there's time zone issues.
Yeah, he figured it would be more fun to just listen to us discuss it in the end anyway. So we're going to go ahead and forge into this tome.
Yeah. So I guess the basics, main characters. So we have Richard Cypher, Colin Omnell, Zed, the wizard.
Zed Zorander.
Zedicus Zul Zorander, first of all.
Triple Z's.
Triple Z.
How I felt when I was reading this book sometimes. Actually, not really. That's true. But right off the gate, we can talk about right out the gate here, fantasy names. Like, we're probably going to be talking about broader fantasy novel themes while we do this podcast, and let's start right out the gate with the naming conventions that might occur in any sort of fantasy novel. This one is especially guilty of the normal name, weird name thing.
Yeah.
You got like there's Richard, and then there's Bill, and then there's like a Ted maybe somewhere in there. There's a couple other characters with like normal names, and then you have Zed and Kalan.
And then, oh my God, can we talk about our favorites? Our favorite bros?
Who are our favorite bros?
Penis rail.
Penis rail. Okay, well, it's penis rail. That's not exactly how it's pronounced, although it might be depending on if you take the TV show. That was based on this series of books.
Yeah, they took this. Okay, so it's about to be a 15-book series. The last book is coming out the end of this year. The whole series is called the Sword of Truth series. And about
I'm going to speak my mic forward a little bit. Apologize for that.
No, that's fine. About, 13 years ago? Maybe 15 years ago? They
I wasn't counting.
I don't know. It was like 2000 or 2001. Someone decided to try to make this into a series. They did 2 seasons. It looks fucking awful. They changed the plot around almost entirely. The acting was bad. You can just look it up on YouTube. They made all of this one type of character like a giant horde of lesbians, and they're not really in the books. It's just craziness.
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just nothing to do with the story. Like, why did you have to put that in there?
TV show?
Yeah, exactly.
Game of Thrones got to use that sex position.
Yeah,
why can't anyone else use it?
I don't know. This the
TV show didn't look good, but anyway, we're pronouncing sort of the main female lead's name as Kalan.
Well, I say Colin.
Yeah, whatever. It's Kalan.
Colin, whatever. I'll say Colin.
The TV show says Kaylin, which is like
sense.
some American suburbia shit that, yeah. I guess if you're going with the normal name thing, they were trying to lean towards that or something.
Yeah.
But she has an AH in her name, and this other character that we mentioned, Penis Rail, as we're saying, was actually Panis Rahl. Yep. Although if you accept the naming convention of the TV show, it might be Panis Rail.
Yeah.
His name's Panis. I'm sorry, but you can't expect me not to giggle at any name that's a letter away from penis.
Well, my favorite
is... If you had a character named Virginia, I'm without the R, I will giggle the whole time. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, that's like his son is Darken Rahl. The whole time, all I could do was think about this guy as Rob Darken. Rob Darken, for anybody that's into metal out there, if you're listening to this, obviously you know who that is. Guy that is Graveland, just a totally ridiculous caricature of a human being. So the whole time I'm just thinking of the main villain as Rob Darken, which made it all the funnier for me and for any of you who know who that is.
Yeah. So there's these fantasy names. Darken Rahl is sort of our main antagonist through the whole thing. Who,
as you said, is like comically evil to a point.
Yeah, we'll get into. So that's one of the problems I have with this book. But let's just kind of start it out here. We have our main characters, which we start with Richard. He's like a woods guide or something like that. He's out in the forest, as you are in fantasy worlds all the time.
Yep, always in the forest.
Starts out in the forest till randomly one day. And he spies the female lead from afar.
Yep.
Chance meeting, of course. And she's being followed by a squad of guys.
A quad, as it were.
4 guys is called a quad. And real, fantastical naming conventions going on here. He follows her down, tries to save her, and they get into a tussle with the quad. Some dudes end up killed. There's a weird magic light or whatever.
No, a weird magic thunder without sound. That's how it's described.
Yeah, but wouldn't that just be lightning?
Thunder and light. Oh my God, we've had this conversation before, Chris.
Yeah, but lightning is the visual, and thunder is the sound of the lightning.
Sometimes, not always. If it was really lightning, he would have just said lightning. He wouldn't have said thunder without sound.
Yeah, but then
it's a feeling. It's a reverberation. Anyway,
okay.
so there's this magical, crazy
Let's
magical.
Not quibble over.
Yeah.
We've gotten to this argument before about thunder and lightning, believe it or not.
Yes, we have.
Lengthy arguments about thunder versus lightning, but continue.
Yeah. So anyway, he saves her. It starts off with this like damsel in distress scenario, and you're like, oh,
she's
fucking
not
God,
really
not
in
this.
Distress.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like you're like, oh God, not this again. But then later you kind of find out that like she wasn't really in distress, and Richard was just being a typical dude thinking that she
Yeah,
needed
so
help.
anyway, they meet up, they have the meeting, and Richard tries to get to know her better because, hey, you see a lady chilling in the woods getting chased by some dudes. You want to help her out.
Yeah, and she was in this
you
like,
kill some guys
pristine-
with this lady. You might want to know about her.
Well, and she was in this pristine white dress like he'd never seen anything like it, and she had long hair, which in this book is a mark of importance. So
Not where he lives.
not where that's true, not where he lives. Fuck, never mind. But the dress, I remember him thinking like, oh, that's what were you doing in the forest in this pure white dress? That's kind of weird.
Yeah, might get dirty. I don't know. She's like a nymph lady, just wanders around
The nymphs-
singing
Anyway,
lightly and dancing.
so from- no.
You know those forest
No.
ladies always out in the
No.
forest
So-
doing forest things.
Yeah, but okay, so Richard is from Westland where there is no magic. None of that shit. So he just thinks this is another woman. Whatever. They get to talking. He decides to help her. Then they have to go to...
They go to his brother's house. His brother
Yeah.
just got elected first counselor, which is, I don't know, president of Westland or something.
Yeah, he's president of Westland.
Or something, and they go, and he's like, "Oh, my brother can help you out, or whatever." And
But his brother
I have my
sucks.
buddy Chase over here.
Yeah.
And so they go over to Michael's house, and he's accepting his speech. He's accepting his position as first counselor today, and he gives this pretty ruckus speech meant to fire people up. Interestingly enough, he also he has a problem with fire.
Yep.
The introduction to this character is that he gives a big speech about how fire needs to stop. We need to very much stop fire.
Yeah,
it's a problem around here.
that is his platform.
Fire needs to be extinguished.
Yeah, when I read that, I
All
was like,
fire needs
what?
to be extinguished.
It was the strangest political platform I've ever seen.
Yeah, I suppose. Every time I read through this book, fire became kind of this theme later on, where there's a reason he's not just like, fire sucks, man. It's too warm. But I thought of people that were so proactive about fighting fires that they wouldn't even let you have a lighter or something.
No, that's how
just
it is,
imagine a
though.
squad of firefighters were like just tossing your lighter to the ground and be like, "Hey, we told you no fire ever."
No,
Have a
that's
cigarette dangling from your mouth unlit. Just
that
sad.
is what happened though. I mean, eventually it became like people couldn't have fires in their homes. They couldn't cook. They couldn't use it for warmth.
Yeah, fire is not allowed apparently.
Yeah. And his bullshit reason is that his mother was killed in a fire.
Yeah, that's sort of his. Just like,
Richard
we've
and
all
Mike-
lost someone to evil fire. No one
Yeah.
should have to suffer fire anymore.
Yeah, and the crowd is like, "Yeah, fire's
Fuck fire, man! I hate it.
Yeah, like,
that shit
what?
is hot.
Yeah, it was very strange.
People loving it though.
But like, what is it? Like a page later, you're like, I was like, oh, okay, I know what that's about. Then he's in cahoots with the dude.
Yeah, he's
Because
clearly.
they had just mentioned that fire was a thing with Rob Darkin over there.
Yeah,
so
he kind of that
Yeah.
gets into that later, but let's continue because
Yeah.
this sort of the intro. This is all set up
yeah.
stuff for that.
So
really doesn't matter a
anyway,
whole lot
he and
later.
Colin leave. They take Chase with them to get to the boundary between
Let's explain
Westland
who
and
Chase
Midland.
is,
He is Richard's boundary warden friend.
but they don't take him yet. You're mixing things up here.
They go to his house first, but I was trying to.
They
skip
go to
over.
Chase's house later. They go to Zed's house first. It's just him and Colin.
Oh, did they get Zed and oh, you're right. Yeah, whatever. It doesn't really matter. We're trying to skip over all the smaller things that happen
Yeah.
here. So anyway, this little contingent.
Colin's looking for an old wizard that
Yeah.
that people in the Midlands where she's from used to know. There's a boundary between the Midlands and the Westlands.
It's a magical boundary.
Magical boundary that's super hard to cross or what have you.
Yeah, because you have to go through the underworld.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Yeah.
so she crossed through that somehow. It's mystifying, and she's like, I gotta find this old wizard guy. Do you know anyone who might know where a wizard is? And Richard's like, oh, I got this buddy I know who likes to watch clouds a lot. That sounds like he might know where a wizard would be.
Yeah, when he left the Midlands because he was tired of magic. Wonder.
Again, I don't think Richard knew that.
I think he did.
I read this book quite a lot in one go, so some things got kind of hazy for me, but I don't think Richard knew anything about Zed.
Anyway, dude, it's so obvious that Zed is the goddamn wizard.
Yeah, Zed, who
it's
was
like,
Richard's friend,
Jesus
who was like
Christ.
his foster grandpa or something
Yeah.
like that, is sort of been like teaching him how to look at clouds or something. The whole time, by the way, I was picturing old man yells at cloud from The Simpsons.
Yeah, that
Apparently,
news
that's
headline.
really what Zed does. Is like kind of stands on a rock and like looks at clouds and yells at them or something
Yeah,
for a
it's
while.
pretty. Oh, and he's also naked while he does it.
Yeah,
It's
he likes
better.
to get a
magic
little-
is better when you're naked. That's something you learn from
I
this
can
book.
get down with that.
Yeah,
I can get down with that.
I guess.
Anyway, so Richard brings Colin over to Zed, and they, he reveals pretty quickly. He's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm that wizard that she was looking
Well,
for."
because remember, they both look at each other and they initially like want to kill. They give each other like death glares,
Yeah.
but then I forget. They say something they bond over about quads murdering people, I think.
Yeah, Richard figures that Zed is the wizard out because Kalan had mentioned that a quad killed this old wizard's family.
Yeah.
And he mentioned the quad that had gone after Kalan, and Zed got a weird look on his face, and
then hugged Colin instantly.
Yeah, that was a weird enough look for Richard to figure out, like, oh, you must be the wizard, I guess, even though nothing else about his super weird friend's past tipped him off about this.
Oh, and surprise, Richard's really good at figuring out the truth because he's special too.
Well, yeah, here's the thing. After they meet up with Zed for a second, he decides to name Richard the Seeker, which is apparently a sort of powerful office of some sort, that you have a fancy sword with the word truth sort of written on the hilt or something.
Yep.
The whole time this was going on, I don't know if you've ever watched the Dave Chappelle show a whole lot, but have you?
No.
Okay, well, then you want to say, I was imagining like this Rick James style sort of indent that he could punch onto people's faces that would say truth backwards. You really need to watch that at some point if you haven't, because I'm sure everyone else in the audience here gets that joke. But
sorry.
So yeah, anyway, he gives Richard the sword. He's like, oh, by the way, you're clearly the Seeker now. Apparently wizards just know the Seeker.
Well, they don't. That's the thing. They have to... It's weird, like, they are pretty sure that a person would be a good seeker,
unless he's not. It's like one of those things where it's like, well, I thought, but if you're not, I guess you weren't, and I was wrong, but it doesn't matter because... But
the thing is, like, he's been grooming Richard his whole life because he always thought he was a seeker, which we find out later.
I didn't realize that part. I thought he was just fostering Richard because...
Did you actually finish the book?
Yeah, I did, but I thought he just was fostering Richard because he went through all this crap and he wanted to take care of him, not necessarily because he was grooming him to be a seeker.
No, but that's one of the things. I mean, plus there's the other reason, but we'll get to that way later. Yeah. But yeah, he said a couple of times, like, yeah, I always thought when you were growing up, like, you know, that it was going to be you. I didn't want it to be you because I didn't want to put you in danger because, you know, you mean a lot to me. You're like a grandson to me or whatever.
So yeah, let's explain, I guess, what the Seeker is supposed to be. Basically, you have the magic sword of truth, which grants you some sort of rage powers.
Yeah,
it channels your anger into like this sword being really good. Like it can cut through pretty much anything with ease, like chainmail, bones, trees, not a problem. If you're angry enough, if you're convinced enough in the truth of your attack, let's say, it'll go through whatever.
So you're like a Sith, kind of.
What?
Right?
What?
Isn't that how like?
No, what?
Yeah.
Have you watched Star Wars?
Yes, I have. Don't
know.
They use their anger to fuel their side of the Force?
Yeah, but that doesn't really make it, like, it's not just anger. Let's not go into the whole Star Wars.
It's similar enough. Well, there's other Star Wars parallels.
Yeah, there's plenty of Star Wars parallels, and that's not... there are creatures in this book called Mord Sith.
Yeah,
which like, come on. And Darkin Rawl sounds a little bit like Darth whatever.
Yeah,
Darth Maul, even though this book came out way before then. And there's some I am your father type shit happening later.
Yeah.
I literally thought that the I am your father scene was about to happen.
Yeah,
I
did too.
I was just waiting
too.
for a search your feelings. You know it to be true.
No, I was waiting for that too. After all the other parallels, I was like, oh man, they're gonna be like dangling over a cliff. There's gonna be a lost hand.
Yeah,
like, something's gonna happen.
Back to what the Seeker is. Just magical sword channeling rage powers.
Yeah.
If you're not convinced of the veracity of your intent to kill,
it won't let you.
It'll like stop your hand an inch away from something or like that. There's some other stuff in general, like just the Seeker is like just really good at finding the truth out, or he just happens to have really good instincts towards going the right path.
Yep.
Which is kind of a thing in this book, in that almost everything is resolved in a coincidental way.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous to the point where...
Is forgivable because...
No, it's not forgivable.
Well, not somewhat forgivable because of the way the Seeker is explained, I would say. It's just because that is the nature of the Seeker. But that does not only apply to Richard. There's a whole lot of other stuff where just people are in the exact right place at the exact right time for dramatic effect, and it is pretty dramatic most of the time. It did have me gripped.
This is why we're reading it for Terrible Book Club, I guess, is just to talk about these things and how they've become so conventional in fantasy novels. Yeah, I don't know. It was just a lot of things were just way too... Actually, everything was way too convenient. Everything is too convenient. And I'm not saying the story wasn't a good story, but god damn,
this is kind of the point I wanted to argue with you is sort of, does the derivative nature of a piece of work necessarily make it bad or terrible in our case? Because you can tell a good story with familiar parts.
Yeah.
And this has a lot of familiar parts.
Too many familiar
It's
parts.
basically the hero's journey. As you know, there's the wise old wizard in Zed, of course,
Yeah.
the female lead who isn't really a damsel in distress. Kalon is more than capable of handling herself in quite a bit of situations. The hero that doesn't really want it, comes from humble beginnings, but finds out he's special and destined.
Yep.
Then again, it's kind of everyone is special and destined in a way.
Everyone's
Except
talked
maybe
about in
Chase,
prophecy.
who is just straight up a badass. That just he just really is good at fighting, I guess. But even then, everyone is super good.
Yeah, at whatever their station is, right? Like, yeah, Chase isn't prophesized or anything, but he's like the best boundary warden ever.
Badass character, actually. I kind of enjoyed his character a whole lot.
Of course you did.
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Of course you did.
Okay. Well, so yeah, Zed names Richard the Seeker.
Yeah.
And Kalon tells him that she is trying to stop Dark and Rawl from obtaining the 3 boxes of Orden.
Yep.
Which it's sort of like this magical puzzle box thing where you have to get all 3 and then open them on a certain day, the first day of winter, and you have to pick the right one to become Lord of all magic or something, because they're sort of like these I guess crucibles of all the magic in the world or something like that.
It's almost like they're
not really the source, but they can control, like they give you lots of power. Or some, I'm not exactly sure how the boxes of Orden worked, and that's another thing with this book is that magic. Whenever you're writing fantasy, I assume one of the things you have to deal with right out of the gate is how do fantastical things work? How does magic work?
Yeah.
Is there a limit on it or something? Because what happens a lot in this book is that it'll be like, oh, we're in this situation. By the way, I have this spell.
Yeah, that's the thing.
There needs to be a spell to like cause a dramatic encounter or a conflict, so this one guy has one spell that fits really well, or someone else has like the exact counter spell, or someone just left something out until the very end and just didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, I think that was a major problem I had with the book, is that it felt like every magical thing was just being pulled out of Terry's ass as he was writing, instead of creating the magical world and then using it in the story, he was just coming up with it as he went, and it was like
rules, but I never ever felt like I had a clear grasp on how magic works, or even though he tries to describe this difference between additive and subtractive magic or whatever, which is really loose and wobbly for me to begin with. It's like additive magic is stuff where
it's good magic.
You just it's not that it's good, it's just that you add more on to something instead of taking it away, and subtractive magic is somehow harder.
But it's also linked to the underworld.
It's like if you hone a blade down, that's not subtractive magic, it's additive magic, because you're just working with what's already there or something like that. Zed can do all these kind of weird feats, like he can grow his beard out instantly. He can like cause pain at a touch. He has fire from his hands.
Yeah, wizard fire.
He has all sorts of random shit where like you don't really ever have like a solid bearing on what his abilities are. I'm going to spoil something for you that I read later in the series. Zed has like some straight up nuke spells.
Huh.
He was straight like there's some spell later in the series that he sets off that murders like an army that's 600,000 strong or something like that. Just
well, then why the fuck did he use that on the People's Palace then?
I don't know. I'm sure in the later books.
This is what I mean.
I'm sure in the later books there's like there's a limit on it or something. There's at least like some kind of limitations on these magic spells or something. But then there'll be a loophole again.
Well, that's right. We didn't even talk about Colin. So Colin is a confessor.
Yeah, let's not hide this much, because she's hiding it from Richard for most of the novel, but she's something called a confessor.
She's actually the mother confessor.
The head of this sort of all-female small group. It's only like less than 10 women ever, I think. Like they pass it down from mother to daughter. But it's these women that at a touch can make you totally devoted to them, to the point where like your existing personality has been completely erased and all you care about is serving your mistress here.
Right,
confessor.
Which I guess sounds a little weird and like BDSM, but it's actually not.
The BDSM comes way later.
Yeah, there's 100 pages of that.
That's the Mort Sith, basically.
Yeah.
They're the BDSM ladies.
But I actually thought the idea of the confessor was really cool, because
that's original. That's a new thing.
No, I liked it because it was interesting. It was like these wizards, eons ago or whatever, made this group of women able to kind of pass this ability down genetically through their daughters. And so Well, actually, they can pass it to sons as well, but they always murder the sons.
Yeah, dudes just want to fuck all the time and use their power to just create a harem, and it causes some problems, apparently.
Yeah, I guess. Well,
but women,
honestly,
you see,
though,
can like hold it back a little more because
I didn't like that part. See, I had an issue with this because it sets those traditional gender stereotypes where, oh, women can handle the power because they're empathetic all the time and they'll always be good at it, and men are always fucking rapey and evil. Like, that's not really true.
No, that's not for all men. It's all male confessors. Well, not all male confessors. They said there's some that are totally fine or whatever.
No, but they've never had a successful male confessor. That's why they murder all the male babies born to confessors.
I thought there was some that used to be okay, but then it was just too high of a chance to take because there was that whole like thing where a bunch of them went wild and everybody was under their spell for quite a bit because the male confessors don't have to recharge.
No, they do.
I thought they didn't. I thought that was why they could just keep doing it.
No, they could. They still did.
The female confessors do definitely have to recharge.
Yeah, and the recharge, so
they can touch one person and that person becomes totally devoted to them, but there's a cooling down period, a refractory period, let's say.
Yeah, usually it takes a couple days.
I'm fucking tired after that, baby. Just let me turn around, go to sleep. Yeah. It's fine. Just wake me up later. We'll go again.
But no, so usually it takes a couple days, maybe a week. But for Colin, it only takes her 2 hours, sometimes less.
She's ready to go real quick if you want.
Yep. Yep. Just keep making that joke, Chris. So I thought the idea of this person in this and confessors are basically confessors and seekers and wizards. Those three are all
very linked together. It's a way the wizards established the confessors and seekers in order to root out political corruption.
Yes,
because the confessors, because you're sort of devoted to them, they'll be totally honest with you. Sometimes, like if you're a criminal and you're convinced that you're innocent, you would rather spend your years in servitude to a confessor after they touch you, because everyone knows you're telling the truth. If a confessor touches you, that's sort of one of the horrifying aspects of some of this stuff, which was kind of neat or whatever. And so wizards would use this to sort of root out political corruption.
But what I liked is that the wizards, seekers, and confessors are sort of a rule unto themselves, and they're, every other queen, king, political official, everyone else is subject to their
scrutiny.
Yeah. So, they can waltz in wherever they please and just be like, yo,
sup, bitch? Yeah. The confessor up in here.
Yeah, basically. And the mother confessor is particularly powerful. But of course, because they have this gift, they can't really have normal human relationships, because how could you have a husband if your touch erases his personality and turns him into
the touch isn't like an instant thing. It's like sort of they have to consciously hold it back. And so the thing that's pretty much spelled out is that, like, hey, while you're doing it, you're not going to be able to hold it back because you know what happens when it gets real good, right?
Yeah. Basically, it would be an orgasm of just taking over someone else's
you come so hard that, like, the person you're having sex with literally becomes devoted to you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a powerful orgasm.
Yeah, that's a scary orgasm. I mean...
Would it be, or would it be the greatest orgasm?
No, it'd be scary.
Maybe for you, but...
Oh, okay. So you want to...
I don't know what I'm saying. I'm trying to
this is why you can't be a confessor, Chris. Fucking male confessors.
Yep, clearly I wouldn't be able to control myself.
Anyway, so because being a confessor sort of alienates you from normal human relationships, people fear them. Oh, that's right. And confessors do eventually have to take a mate because they have to continue their line.
But it's sort of
it's awful because
they can pick any male in any society at will, even if they're married. It's just like, nope, it's you. We're gonna make this baby, and
but it sucks because they're just a shell, you know. So it's really shitty for confessors because they can't really ever fall in love. And if they
fall in love, but they can't have a moment of intimacy attached to it.
Exactly.
Which, depending, I've seen some relationships that aren't physically intimate, but could be definitely quality love. I
but I'm saying they can't have a typical romantic relationship wherein there is sexual intimacy, and that sucks.
It does. It very much does.
Yeah. So, anyway... That's
confessors.
Yeah.
We explained seekers. Wizards are like pretty self-explanatory in this book.
They're pretty traditional wizards.
They just have magic powers. Again, it's never really clearly explained. It's just whenever there's a need for some spell, Zed usually has an appropriate thing, or if he does, depending on what's dramatic, is essentially sort of the name of the game here, which is sort of the broader problem, again, with fantasy novels in general is if you don't clearly lay out these rules, it's sort of like you can never really know when they're totally in danger or not, even though I felt like the characters were in danger at some points, but spoiler, all of the main characters, fine by the end. There's no major deaths or anything. Let's take the moment
which
here,
I also hate.
To mention, because I became very emotionally attached to one character in this book. She's introduced about 400 pages in. Not like necessarily a major player.
She is a major player.
And she's a tool, as you put, of another character in the thing. But it's this little girl. She's adorable. She's just this tiny little girl that's the playmate of a princess in a castle that treats her very badly. As soon as this character is introduced,
it's like
she's slapped across the face.
Yeah.
The problem I had was because that this little girl was adorable in literally every way. And she shared a first name, with a very good mutual friend of ours.
Right, and the funny thing is, I also thought of the character as the same person.
Yeah, this character's name is Rachel, by the way.
Yep.
And currently, this Rachel that we know has a Facebook picture that's a drawing that someone made of her. That is also very adorable. So the whole time I was reading this book, I saw this like adorable version of her just getting slapped around, and it made me so sad. And every time she was in danger, she didn't even have any shoes for half of the book, and then she was scared and crying all the time. She like chews on the hem of her dress and like on the foot of her doll that the wizard gave her that tells her it loves her until the wizard dies.
Chris,
and my heart melted, Paris. It melted. I could not. I had so much anxiety.
Oh my god, it's too funny.
I couldn't take it whenever she was in any danger. I wanted to fly into the book and just hug her.
You wanted to put your wizard hat and robe on and fly in?
No, it was a little small girl that I just wanted to protect from any sort of fear, but it was probably the most emotionally invested I've been in a character because she just deserved nothing bad to happen to her. And she mostly got away unscathed, although I did not like with the princess that treated her very badly.
That's okay. That princess got her shit served to her.
Yeah,
so no
later
worries.
in this book, this princess gets her jaw removed basically by a good kick to the bottom of her chin. She's only about like a 10-year-old girl or something too,
beautiful
but she
when it
fucking
happens.
deserves it. You kidding me? You do not slap around another little girl.
Dude, I could picture that in my mind, and I was like, that's the most beautiful thing I've read.
One of the most delicious moments in the entire book was when it was actually Richard that did it, that just kicked this little girl square in the jaw.
Severed her fucking tongue.
Don't worry, she deserved it.
I might
Dear
sound
audience.
like I might sound like a monster, but seriously,
no, I relished that moment.
Okay, good. I'm glad we both did.
So this is a character that comes in later, much later in the things when the characters are, because eventually Kalan, Richard, and Zed leave on their journey to get to the Midlands to find one of the 3 boxes of Orden that Dark and Rahl does not have.
Right.
To prevent him from getting it on the first day of winter, so he can't take control of everything. I think there were 3 results, basically. You can open 3 boxes, and so it's this sort of like game of chance that Dark and Rahl has.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious game of chance, man.
Yeah, if you open 1 box, you get power over all magic and living things, basically. You can think people dead if you just feel like it. Just absolute dominion over everything. The second box instantly kills the person who opened it, so who has ever performed the ritual. And the third box just erases everything.
Yeah,
so it's basically a 2 and 3 shot of just pure shit for everybody.
Yep.
And then a 1 and 3 shot of him getting fucked and like it all being for nothing for him. Let's take this moment to discuss Dark and Rahl here.
Oh yeah.
Basically the most cartoonishly evil, over-the-top character.
Yeah.
If you didn't like Joffrey Baratheon in Game of Thrones,
this guy's way
nothing
worse.
In comparison to Dark and Rahl here, who has there's 0 redeeming qualities about him. There's nothing to.
I don't know.
There's no point of light within him.
I liked him a little bit.
I don't like. Do you like him as a character? I'm saying that he's unequivocally evil.
Yeah, but
there's no room for you to say.
I really liked his desire to know all things and all the effort he put into learning all the magic that he did. That was really his only redeeming quality.
I guess, but
and then he can
character.
He can put what he thinks is the greater good before his own
I didn't even
interests.
really believe his greater motivation. He just wanted power for the sake of being powerful over everything. I don't believe
because
he got
he
got maimed when Zed burned his dad penis rail alive, and he got burnt a little bit too, and he had to go through some traumatic shit because wizard fire doesn't heal very well.
Yeah, which is why.
But I don't think that's super believable for him to just be totally, completely fucking off the wall evil.
He's pretty off.
This dude feeds a child molten lead through a feeding horn in order to cut him up, mash his brain, heart, and testicles into a paste that he eats in order to somehow conjure a spirit guide, demon version of the child to take him through the boundary by going through the underworld.
Correct.
By the way, a lot of ball sack eating in this book. There's at least 2 instances of people's ball sacks getting eaten.
That's true.
So if you're into that, read this book, man.
Well, honestly,
but his whole cadre is all just like super evil. There's like his pedophile right hand man.
Yeah, there's a lot of rape in this book. It's weird because it doesn't really make an appearance until like well into halfway through the book.
Well, no, when you first meet Demis, what's his name?
Demon Nos
or whatever. I keep saying I want to say Dennis from like, It's Always Sunny or something, but Demon Nos is like his pedophile right hand that likes to have his way with boys or something. Meanwhile, Dark and Raw just likes to sacrifice and eviscerate them.
Well, he doesn't need to do it a lot, only when he needs a spirit guide to the underworld.
His redeeming quality. He doesn't have to do it all the time.
And he doesn't actually enjoy it because he's a vegetarian, right?
Oh, yeah. So evil people are all vegetarians.
Yeah, so I guess I'm fucking evil made flesh over here.
Unless you have to, chew someone's testicles to get through the underworld. You're not going to do it, I suppose.
No.
But
he
I just
loves
like
raping women.
So
he loves raping women. Remember, he rapes Denna to the point of
that's
being
what I
barren.
mean. Like
what?
It's so over the top that it's almost just plain unbelievable. I suppose there's room for characters like these, and especially in fantasy novels where there's always like the Dark Lord of everything who, is just unequivocally evil and no bones about it, just pure black and stuff. But like, it's not as interesting if they don't have sort of a believable backup story for it.
Yeah, I mean,
and his whole cadre is not just him, his right-hand pedophile dude, all his like
the Mord
execution
Sith.
people, the Mord Sith, who are just people that have been raped and tortured for years and years and years and put through all kinds of unhuman pain and stuff like that.
Just so they can serve Lord Rawl and protect him.
I can understand other people being subjugated by him because he can command pain at a whim and he has this Mord Sith at his right hand and all this powerful magic and stuff like that. So people have to follow him, but there's just so many people around him that are just totally black evil, no white or gray area at all, and that's not as compelling, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely and same for the characters on the good side. None of them have any bad qualities. Even
though Zed has a discussion with Richard at the very beginning before they set off on their journey that, it seems right from your angle because you're at your perspective. Like, everyone else thinks that they're absolutely right. Even though in the context of the larger book, you're like, no fucking way. There's no.
That's the thing. Yeah, at the beginning, it tries to bring up this conversation about moral relativity, and I thought that was good.
And there's no room for that, though.
Right, but
there's absolutely no room for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you're. It's really hard to see moral relativity when your only choices are a peaceful world or a world where little boys are constantly raped and women are raped and
Dark and Raw,
everyone
he's
is
talking
miserable.
about, it's for the common good. I'm going to lead people into but there's no, he doesn't care a whit about any of that. He just wants to rule for the sake of ruling. Yeah. I would believe it if he really thought, no, I can lead the world into prosperity through these, but that's never a thing.
But no,
him.
He lies to people at every turn just for his own personal gain. There's, like you're saying, it's kind of comically evil because there's no believable aspect to it.
But here, let's get into this. Is this appropriate for this style of genre fiction? Because fantasy novels are a type of genre fiction that have to stick to a certain thing to get its audience, I suppose.
No, I don't think it has to.
It doesn't have to, but you definitely... People like familiarity in a certain way. You have to have a couple of touchstones that people...
Yeah, but this is like every touchstone ever in this one book.
Here's our major problem with the book, I guess, is that the main discussion that we were having is what's the value of originality versus a sort of keeping an audience with what they want? Is it necessarily a terrible book if it remixes certain well-known themes and tropes?
I just don't think it remixes it well enough. I mean, I think there are some original aspects to the book, but mostly it's just in that puddle of mediocrity that's sort of like consuming the fantasy genre, I feel like.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of fantasy books if you want sword and sorcery shit. There's all the Drizzt Do'Urden series, Forgotten Realms stuff. Our friend who recommended this series to us, described that there was a lot of stuff that Terry Goodkind lifted from Wheel of Time.
Yeah, I've never read
another
Wheel of Time.
I haven't read it either. That's kind of why I was hoping he was going to be a guest on this, so he could explain to us or something like that.
Well, there's other stuff, like we were talking about all the Star Wars parallels, but then there's Samuel. Can we talk about Samuel?
Yeah, Samuel is the sort of slave companion to a woods witch that they encounter later named Shota, who just kind of pushes them in the right direction. It's kind of a side piece. It's not really
it's a
important to the
really
story.
dumb fucking.
There's a lot of side trackings here that, like, no, they just kind of on the path to Dark and Raw, where each one part you don't have to have. But in the larger context of the story, I suppose, built it up enough.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Samuel is the companion of this woods witch who turned out to be the former Seeker, apparently.
Yeah, and apparently that happens to all the Seekers.
Yeah,
they turn
and Zed's
into,
just like, it probably won't happen to you, Richard. Don't worry about it. Probably won't.
Yeah, you
We'll figure it out.
turn into like a lizard thrall to a woods witch.
You turn to Gollum.
Yeah, it's
Samuel's
Gollum.
He even says, mine, give me, to his sword, like it's his precious. Like, he's fucking Gollum, dude.
That was so annoying to me. I was like, are you fucking serious?
There's a lot of stuff in here that really is kind of lifted.
Oh, yeah. Let's get to the talking wolves and talking dragons, because that's in here too, guys. It's all in here.
Well, yeah, the magic sword that's, has magic properties and everything. That's a touchstone of fantasy literature, to be
right.
sure.
And you know what? I just want to say this. First of all, we're both nerds. We play D&D. We read fantasy novels.
I'm your dungeon master, in fact,
Yeah,
Paris.
you are. That's true. That's true. So it's not like we're just sitting here shitting on the fantasy genre.
I love fantasy stuff. In fact, I really enjoy a lot of sort of the normal cultural touchstones that are present in modern fantasy literature.
Yeah, but I guess that's why we're arguing for the fact that maybe people shouldn't think about stuff like this book as the be-all and end-all. Like, we love the genre so much, we want it to evolve. We want it to change a little bit.
I don't think anyone really ever thought Sword of Truth was, like, super amazing, the best or anything.
Well, everyone I talked to, because I was like, oh, I'm reading this for, my podcast or whatever, and people were like, oh, I fucking love that series. It's so good. It's so good. And I was like,
but
okay.
here's the argument we were having. I enjoyed reading this book.
So did I.
But
it did annoy me at
really a
times.
problem, though? If we had an entertaining time, if we had a good time reading it, and we wanted to keep going to the point where I read this book in the space of about 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, I read it in 5? I think I crunched it in 5.
Is it a problem?
Well, here's my thing. I think it's a problem in a way, because if you constantly read the same types of fantasy novels where all these hallmarks are present, like Love at First Sight and everyone's special.
Well, Love at First Sight is broader than the fantasy thing.
I know, and we've already discussed that.
Yeah, we don't need to go over how much we hate Love at First Sight.
Yeah, I know. But, as much as people read these books, they're like, oh, they're a distraction from my real life. It's a fantasy. It's not reality. It does enter your mind subconsciously or consciously, and you start to expect these things in real life. And I think that is the danger of
I definitely expect to be able to magically grow my beard at will at some point. That would be amazing.
You expect...
Even though I get told many times that I should leave it short.
Yeah, please don't grow your beard out. Well, that's up to you, man. You can grow your beard out. Do
No,
but...
there's people that prefer it shorter.
Yeah, that's true. You gotta worry about that lady. But... you start to expect these human relationships to form in your own life. And I know that might sound a little crazy, but that's what happens.
I can agree. Like, if you consume enough culture, you do get sort of expectant of a certain type of relationship.
Because then, you start waiting for your Richard Cypher or your Colin Amnell, and you always think that as long as you do what you know to be right, the world will be fine and your friends won't die and good will always conquer evil. And I think that's a really bad thing.
It doesn't necessarily work out that way all the time. Although there was a long enough period that elapsed in this book for Richard and Colin to like sort of legitimately fall in love over their trials and tribulations and stuff like that. Although, once again, as soon as Richard sees her, it's a little more toned down than in like Marked or like even The Overton Window, where it was just like, oh my god, it was definitely, I knew from that second that it was destiny that we're together. And my thing about relationships where it's work and sacrifice, it's never, it's something that builds over time. You and I are not good friends because we instantly clicked. It's because we've spent time together and built up all experiences that we share together, and that's the foundation that a good relationship is built on.
Right, whether romantic or platonic. I mean,
exactly. People that I'm fall in love with romantically, I can never point to one thing that's like that's the exact moment that I found. I can point to moments where I certainly felt it was building or contributed to it or something like that. But there's never a moment where I was like, oh yes, in love now.
Oh,
it's
also
the broader palette of the person.
Not to mention, I can think of plenty of times where I've met a guy and been like, oh man, this guy's great, but then a day later turns out to be a dick. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's just interest at first sight, and people mistake that for love at first sight.
It's a powerful feeling.
It is a powerful feeling when you're like, oh, that person's really attractive. They're really interesting. Like, they like a lot of the same
things. And it turns into like a cute story to tell if you do end up together later.
Right.
And you can be like, oh, I knew from the beginning. But no, that's just like your boner. Like,
yeah,
really,
yeah, it's a
physical reaction. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's be honest about it. Right,
there's nothing wrong with it, but you have to be smart enough to know what it is and not call it what it's not.
Although I think in this book, the relationship is handled fairly well, even though there is some love at first sight things happening.
Right, no. And that's what I'm saying.
Richard,
I really like
they're
the
fairly
writing.
Communicative, even though they keep secrets from each other for most of the book. Richard doesn't tell her that he is the keeper of the Book of Counted Shadows.
Oh, yeah, we didn't bring that up. That's right. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, in a second. But, like, you know, Colin keeps that she's a confessor and everything, but their relationship is mostly built through communication and trying to be honest with each other. There's even a scene later where sort of Colin abuses his trust when they're with the mud people, she just lets him. Apparently, they're cannibals and only of their enemies that they've slaughtered. And
that's how you gain power.
Ritual
eating the flesh of your
supposed
enemies. Chris, do you not eat the flesh of your enemies?
Well, I mean, I've thought of no.
Okay.
But there's a ritual that they have to go through to become mud people because they want to become mud people to get the guidance of these people. By the way, mud people, I have a problem with that name.
Yeah.
Once again, here's your native peoples that are mystical and tribal and what have you that you have a problem with.
Fetishized mystical people, yep.
You know, they live all by themselves and they have their fucking ayahuasca trip things, spirit walks, vision things that Richard and Colin go through. And Colin abuses his trust at one point because she's the translator that understands the mud people's language, and she doesn't let him know that if you're to become a mud person, you have to like take a bride from one of the mud people.
Yep, and eat some flesh.
Eat some flesh with the things. And he's kind of cool with that. He eventually tricks and gets his way out of having to have sex with like the niece of the
that's
elder.
that's the other thing. Like, I think it's hilarious that he does all that to get out of having sex with this lady, but then gets stuck in a sex dungeon for like weeks later on.
Yeah, there's never like any overt sex scenes in this book, I think.
But he fucks Denna. Denna makes him fuck her.
There's sex that happens in this book, but it's like the
mercifully it is not written about.
The lead up to the sex is described very often. There was even an encounter that Richard and Colin had almost where it was sort of this dramatic point because you're like, oh no, she's gonna have her like mind rape orgasm and take over him or something. Yeah. And there was like a little bit of apple juice kind of thing. A lot of fingers and mouths and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, you don't like
gross.
that? That's not for you? That's not okay. Well, okay, you know, different.
I'm not gonna.
Different apples for different folks, I suppose.
Dude, if I'm gonna fuck you, I'm not gonna like put my fingers in apple juice and put it in your mouth. That's
they were eating the apple, and they got kind of weird about eating the apple. She was like shoving it in his mouth, just being like, "Eat the fuck, eat the apple." Eat it.
You know what that's about? Yeah, it's like
it was like very Adam and Eve, like forbidden fruit thing that they had happening, and she starts putting her fingers in his mouth instead of the apple.
Gross, like. It made me laugh.
I don't know, man. I can understand. Like, I've never shoved an apple in someone's face like that, but I can understand getting kind of heated about weird stuff, I suppose.
I guess we all have our weird kinks or whatever, but I guess
fingers
fruit
in the mouth isn't
mine.
a weird kink.
Fruit isn't mine.
That's not a kink. It's just, stuff got hot in the moment. They used it's spontaneous.
Dude, things don't get hot eating an apple. Like, that's just not when things get hot, okay?
Well, it's the broader thing. Like, they had this tension building up, and they were alone together with the apple in the spirit house.
That poor apple was just in the wrong place at
Richard
the wrong
was
time.
Shirtless at the time.
Right, for no reason.
So eat the apple.
Oh, God.
Yeah, eat it.
Oh, God, that's so creepy. Don't do that. Oh, Jesus.
Sorry you can't have fun, Paris, apparently. Try it next time. Just start,
I'm not bringing apples into the bedroom.
It doesn't have to be an apple. It could be crab meat or
I don't
carrots.
eat crabs.
Or whatever you want. Your fucking kale chips that you make.
I'm not
your
bringing
weird
kale
coconut curry oil. I don't know, whatever you make in those fucking pans over there, man. Whatever you want, just dump the pan over someone and get busy.
I don't know why this is so funny. Sorry, everyone. We just talked about food sex for like 10 minutes.
That's fine. But yeah, so there's a lot of that, and the sex is built up to. They don't end up having sex. They stop at the last. He friend zones her at the last second. Actually,
wait, does he?
Yeah, he at the very last second, like before he's like, "Oh, we'll just be as friends for now," and she like, "So just hold me tonight then." And
no, she's like, "Oh shit, I'm almost doing this thing," and then she stops.
No, she's like begging for it, and he wants her to tell her what a confessor is. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I'll only give it to you if you tell me what a confessor is, hon. And she's like, oh, I can't tell you, so I'm just going to cry about it. And then he's like, oh, well, then we'll just be friends. So she gets fucking friend zoned, right?
No, I don't think, first of all,
he totally wanted it too. He had the power of the dick at that point.
Yeah, the power of the dick.
And so he was trying to get what a confessor was out of her. And she was like, I'm still not going to tell you. And then that's how she realizes she's about to mess up.
Oh, right.
And then they just hold each other.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of them crying and holding each other, like a little too much.
People hold each other a whole lot. It's a very touchy-feely...
Oh, did you notice everyone pokes each other in the chest all the time at the beginning of the book?
Yeah. It's just a very demanding sort of thing. There's a lot of touchy... People hug each other. Like, Kalan will, like, sort of allow herself to be hugged by mud people that they know her well enough to be friends, but people get hugs a lot in this book, and it's kind of necessary. I can believe it, No,
I know. I mean, they are going through some rough shit. Like, if I were in their place, I might have cried a couple times, but just a lot of crying and holding.
Yeah, a lot of, it's just soft, gentle, like, it's okay, it'll be okay.
Yeah, that a lot.
Which is what I wanted to do to that little girl character named Rachel, who I just wanted to be, it's going to be okay. No one will take your doll away. I'll give you shoes, just please.
Oh, dude, when that doll dies.
That doll doesn't die. It's fine at the end of the book. Paris is lying to you, people. The doll is fine.
Well, not the doll, but you know what I mean. The mechanism by which it.
The doll is because Rachel is being used to spirit a box of Orden that Darkenrahl is coming to pick up from Queen Milena, who rules this country. Tamarang. Princess Violet, who we mentioned earlier, is her daughter, and Rachel is sort of her playmate that is just at her whim to be slapped around. Yep. And this wizard that sort of sold his services to the queen. But he was really just a double agent trying to protect the box. Yeah. He decides the only way he can get the box out is by using Rachel, and he sort of gives her this doll to communicate to her with, because sometimes
he's not around. It's like a cell phone.
Sometimes Rachel gets kicked out of the castle by Violet whenever she does something bad.
Yeah.
Rachel has a secret spot that she actually likes, so she actually likes getting kicked out of the castle. I kind of like. She's a spunky little girl.
She's smart.
She is a smart, spunky little girl who's very brave. And like I said, just so adorable. I didn't want anything bad to happen to her the whole time. And so Giller sort of like gives her this box encased in a loaf of bread, actually, funnily enough.
Pretty brilliant.
That she becomes very protective of. And he uses Rachel to spirit the box away from the castle where Darkenrahl is headed towards.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a side. Rachel's sort of subplot was.
No, I mean that's a main plot point. But she doesn't come in till halfway through.
Yeah, it's like page 400 out of 800. Literally, the halfway point is where you meet Rachel.
Yeah. Yeah, so she gets the box of Orden out. I guess that's a fine place to pick up the plot.
Yeah, because the other stuff was just them traveling through. They get separated from Zed and Chase when...
Oh, and Zed just shows up.
They get attacked at the boundary when they're going through from the Westland to the Midlands.
Yeah, there was like some weird shadow tentacle rape happening there.
Yeah, they got attacked by a beast. Richard can like kill them with his sword of truth.
Oh yeah, heart hounds. Those are scary.
Yeah, Zed and Chase are knocked unconscious. They have to bring them to this witch woman, 80, a bone woman rather.
Yeah, Addie.
Bone woman, different from the wish woman.
Yeah, later. I don't fucking know the difference. Yeah.
And so, but they have to remain unconscious to like heal for a couple of days. So Richard and Kalan have to go on their own into the Midlands. That's where they run into the mud people. They don't have Zed or Chase with them. They eventually make it to Tamarang. And after meeting the Woods Witch too. There's a couple of things that happen after they get separated from Zed and Chase. Zed wakes up before everyone else and just decides he has some other shit to take care of. Even though he gets it on with that bone lady real quick.
Yeah, there's a
little bit of old people action happening in this one too.
No, I like that. I'm glad. Old people need some too.
It was cute.
Yo, man, old people have needs. It's fine.
I will be old one day eventually. And
I'm still going to want to fuck when I'm 70. I'm
sure. Well, you can't be sure, but...
I'm pretty sure. If I make it that, if I make it to that age.
But so Richard and Kalan go off on their own and they're headed to Tamarang. And this is sort of where we see Rachel come in and...
Yeah, she conveniently meets up with them, or rather, they conveniently find her.
There's a couple of chapters with the Rachel stuff where she's just getting abused by Princess Violet.
Yeah, man, that princess locks her in a box at night and cuts her hair crooked.
If she's not kicked out of the castle, she's put in the box to sleep. Which, by the way, Rachel then locks Princess Violet in the box when she is escaping, which was another moment of deliciousness that I loved.
And then she threw the rug over her so no one could hear her scream. I was like, yes!
She sits on the bed to make it sound like she was going to stay there and listen. This is why Rachel is my favorite character in this whole book. She was my favorite character. yeah, that princess gets what's coming to her. Thankfully, the one person I want to see get their comeuppance, even more than Dark and Rawl. I feel like.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way because Dark and Rawl has this reason. She's just a fucking cunt. Like,
yeah,
it's
she's
ridiculous.
just, she's the Joffrey.
Sorry,
I
that's
suppose.
just the word. For
she's
that.
the Joffrey
yeah,
of this
she
book,
is.
where
she's
she's
the
just
Joffrey.
a brat, and you hate her for being a brat.
Yeah, she actually. That's perfect. She is the Joffrey of this book.
Yeah. So again, Rachel is spirited, or she runs out of the castle because the guards just kind of know she's the playmate, and they
and she gets sent out of the castle.
She socially engineers her way out of the castle. Yep. She tricks the guards, and she's like, they're like, I don't think anyone's supposed to be let out now because Dark and Rawl is up in here, and he doesn't want. He figured out that the box was switched and is fake, so he wants the whole castle to be closed down. But she's like, do you want to be the one that I tell Princess Violet didn't let me out when she told me to let out? And she'll probably cut your head off. Yeah,
because that's right, because the kid has been given the authority to just decree that people's heads get cut off now, which is fucking frightening.
So Rachel socially engineers her way out of the castle.
And so they just like look at her doll and her bread, and they're like, all right, whatevs.
She runs away with that adorable doll that she like sort of puts in her mouth sometimes when she's nervous and scared. The same thing she like chews on the edge of her dress when she's Paris. My heart is breaking.
I've never seen you fall in love with a small child.
Well, that's a weird way to put it, but
no, I didn't mean that in a weird way.
I know, but I was very emotionally attached. I didn't want anything bad to, because she was a small little girl that was innocent and didn't deserve anything bad that happened to her. It was a good sort of heartstring pull by Terry on me.
Yeah, you know what? And I really I think we briefly talked about this before the podcast. We try not to talk about the books till the podcast, but sometimes
we have to get some stuff out of the way.
Yeah, sometimes we're walking through the kitchen and it's like, I gotta tell you about this. And we really enjoyed how Terry wrote the Rachel chapters. He did a really good job of sort of perfectly executing how a child like that would think and say things.
In her lines, there's a lot of the bestest, nicest man in the world.
Yeah.
You're mean, and like the blank that I ever did see, and that's not just her dialogue, but that's in like sort of the prose around her and how she's thinking and stuff like that. So it's almost a little bit childish in an effective way. Unlike Marked, which was like supposed to be from the point of view of a teenage girl, which was infuriating, which maybe I suppose is an accurate worldview from a teenage girl.
No. We're not even going to compare the writing styles.
Oh yeah, it's vastly different.
Terry is way better.
So yeah, Rachel gets away from this castle where Dark and Rawl is trying to find the third box of Orden so he can do his mystical puzzle box opening sequence or whatever.
Yeah.
And she runs into Richard and Colin at first, but they don't know who she is. They don't know she has the box, and she's just trying to like not get caught and brought back to the castle. So when they're like, oh, we're going to the castle to meet up with Queen Melina, who's supposed to have the third box so we can keep Dark and Raw from getting it, she gets all upset. And
but they didn't tell her about the box.
Yeah, they didn't tell her about that. They just said they're going to see Queen Melina, which she doesn't want to go back to.
Right.
So, of course, as soon as she has the chance when they're asleep, she runs away.
Which is smart.
She's a smart little girl, okay? And
but she did hang out with them for a couple of days, which I was like, oh, that's dumb. You're lucky these people are good.
It was only like one day, I think. It was like as soon as they fell asleep on the first night.
Was it? Okay, I thought it was a couple days. Whatever.
No, as soon as like they both fell asleep enough on the first night, she runs away with her loaf of bread, and Richard notices that she's super protective of her loaf of bread, more so than like her
doll.
Her doll, in fact, which she likes.
And little girls don't care about anything but their dolls, so there's something up with that bread. Yeah. Especially, that's right. He also found the truth because he said that she was like, oh, I'm going to like, what was it,
my grandmother's
Mill or something?
The mill that Richard and Colin, a town that they had run through before they found, had been like devastated, to make it look like as if Westlander armies had come through because Dark and Rawl is trying to build sympathy for his cause once again. So he gets some of his people to murder and rape a bunch of people
in the name of Westland. In
the name of Westland, so that they submit to Dark and Rawl more.
Yeah.
And when she's like, oh, I'm visiting my grandmother in that town, and he's like, I don't think anyone's left in that town. She's like, that's okay. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah, she didn't seem upset that her grandmother could have been raped and murdered. So he
doesn't really bring it up like that. He's just like, I don't think that you should go over there.
Everyone, they were like, that town was.
She's like, okay.
Yeah, so he was like, okay, there's something up. Anyway, they figure out something up with the loaf of bread.
But she runs away with it before long, and she actually gets, like, there's a little cliffhanger where she encounters a sort of a creature called a gar.
Oh, man, fuck those things. That's what my note was about. Fuck those things. Those are scary.
What are they? They're like winged bears or something? Like,
they're like winged bear... They're like really... Not even bears. They're like...
They're furry. Mammalians somewhere.
They're like bats... they're like really giant bat bears.
Yeah.
And they have flies that live on their stomach.
Yeah,
oh,
and the flies sort of bite you, and as soon as like you smash one, the gar knows something is up because he knows where all his blood flies are or something.
Well, the big gars, right?
Yeah.
No, I forget what they're called. There's like
the short-tailed ones are more dangerous.
Yeah.
And the long-tailed ones are like a little dumber.
Yeah, the short-tailed gars know the exact number of flies they have on them.
Yeah.
And basically they send their flies out to find prey to bite them.
Which is another interesting little
I thought that was brilliant.
There's
I
points
love
of
that
originality
monster.
in this book. It's not totally
No.
tropey, but
Well, it's totally tropey, but there are points of originality in it.
The cool parts. Anyway, Rachel runs into one of these big cliffhanger chapter ending where I was crying because she was about to get eaten by a gar.
I had to comfort Chris because I had finished the book before.
I'm sorry, I had to ask. I couldn't bear the anxiety.
I know. And I was like, don't worry, nothing's going to happen. And we're so used to like the George R. R. Martin world where everything you love is heinously murdered. And I was like, no, we're not reading a George book. It's okay. And he was like,
I was so worried, but eventually it turns out, again, Deus Ex Machina by Chase sort of.
Yeah.
There's not even a scene where she shows up later with Chase, who is the appropriate person to be in charge of Rachel, I feel like.
Of course.
Because,
I figured you'd identify with him the most.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Big burly, like super badass woods guy. Sounds like
that's me for sure.
No, it just sounds like something that you would enjoy being, I guess, if you got a chance.
Yeah, I guess, even though I have no chance of being. It's more that, like, if there was anyone that he has a good family, he cares for them, he has the strength to protect her from a lot of things without necessarily being too involved in anything major.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
You know, far enough away where he's very protective of her, can handle protecting her, and she can, you know, be finally somewhere where she is told that she is loved and it is meant.
Right.
That's all I wanted for Rachel, okay? I just wanted her to have a nice life, and she gets it, thankfully.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I haven't read the other books in the series, even though I immediately went to her wiki page after.
Yeah. I know there's too many books in the series. Like, I'm not reading another 14 of these goddamn things.
But anyway, you know, Rachel gets away with this box, and Richard and Colin are still off to Tamarang to try and get the box. They
realize it's not there. They realize Gillard's
Zed
gone.
has walked back into the picture at this point.
He just
literally walks. Like, they're at a fire. Richard and Colin are like sitting at a fire, and they're like, "Gee, I miss Zed. Well, I wonder what he would say if he was here." And he's like, "What's up? I'm right here."
Yeah.
Like, there's zero explanation.
Yeah,
like, he
it was
literally just traipses back into frame.
Oh, hey. Yeah, the only explanation they give is, he can track them by this nightstone they have.
Yeah, it's like it gives off some light, but it also like lets some shadows in from the underworld to be able to track them.
Can we talk about, while we're talking about them sitting at a fire? Okay, they're both guides. Here's the thing. Richard is a woods guide from Westland. Colin is also a guide of a type from the Midlands.
She just is really well traveled.
Yes, exactly. So she knows exactly where to go. Yet both of them are lighting fires all the time when they're running from the most dangerous person in the world. If you are running from someone, you don't light a fire because you can see that. Why the hell are they lighting fires all the time?
I think they light them because they're confident that the people that are chasing them are at least like a day away or something. They're not right up their ass.
I think it's dumb. I mean,
otherwise they would never stop to rest at all. You know?
Obviously you gotta rest a little bit, but they shouldn't be making fires out in the open all the time. It doesn't really make sense.
Well, you know, because fire is a thing that is outlawed, in fact.
Yeah, they're
in fact,
so badass.
There are firefighters that are mentioned in this book, and they're preventative firefighters that before any fires, this is where my notion came from.
Right.
They fight the fire before it even happens. You're not even allowed to have anything that might...
It's like Smokey the Bear on steroids. Just like,
hey, put that fire away, that lighter, put it down. You have no fire. Do you want someone to catch on fire from your fire? You can't have any fire.
Don't be warm. Too bad. You'll be safer freezing to death.
So, anyway, they're off to Tamarang, and Zed has walked back into the picture at this point.
They get to Tamarang.
I forget, is this the point where they walk in at first acting like they're the Confessors? No, that's later, right? Where they just walk in. That's at the very end where they just walk in.
No, they just walk into Tamarang.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They just walk in.
Because no door is ever closed to the Mother Confessor or the Seeker.
Or the Seeker, and there's a wizard. Even though they don't know he's the wizard yet, because... But they let her walk in, and she has a chat with the queen about
sorry.
You have to
whack
hit
that
there.
boom. Sorry,
that's gonna pop up on the thing.
Oh, sorry, guys.
But anyway, so they walk right in, and Colin sort of uses her confessor status to just try to inspect
dungeons.
What's up with the wizard that she knew would be there, if the box is in the wrong hands or anything like that.
They notice the wizard is conspicuously missing.
They notice he's conspicuously eviscerated when they...
Well, that's way later, though.
No, like, they don't see him at the council when they're gathered with the queen or anything, so they're like, oh, we're going to go see Giller now, and the queen is like, he's not really in a state to talk, meaning that he has his guts ripped out in a room upstairs.
And he's upside down, like... And the room blew up and the roof is gone. Yeah.
Rachel saw this when she left because she saw a huge burst of fire, and that's when the doll stopped telling her that it loved her. Paris, my heart. Paris, my heart. Yeah,
so like I was saying, Giller gave this doll, Sarah, to Rachel as like a magical telephone, basically, where he could just talk to her. But she thought it was the doll.
He would just keep saying, like, oh, I love you, Rachel. You should help Giller.
Yeah. It was just kind of fucked up in a way.
Well, yeah, but
you know.
Anything that little girl could get to have comfort, I'm fine with.
Yeah, and so the doll was like, just remember, the box is really important. I love you, Rachel. I love you. And then she sees the, like, explosion, and then it just stops talking, and you're just like,
tears.
Oh, fuck,
just,
Giller's
that
dead,
really,
man.
That really
Giller's dead,
got me.
man.
I have to say, it's effective writing in this book. It definitely got to me.
Again, the writing in this book I think is really good, and I mean, that's what I enjoyed about it. Anyway.
So they figure out something's up, that Dark and
Giller's fucking eviscerated and hanged from...
Yeah, Dark and Raw is, he reads guts is sort of his... what
was it?
Anthropomancy.
Anthropomancy, yeah.
Where he just eviscerates people.
Isn't it actually just called augury?
I don't know, maybe.
Well, augury is the reading of dead entrails, right?
You tell me.
Yeah. I think so. They tried to give it a different name because when he reads them, the people have to be alive.
Yeah, Dark and Raw just no qualms about eviscerating people, and he didn't mash up this dude's testicles into a paste or anything. That's only for the children that you murder to use them as guides through the underworld or what have you. But
they're children that have to love you.
Yeah. Even though the way, like, the kid that he had in there, his name was Carl, which is another friend of ours, in fact, which I found.
That's right. I forgot about that.
I'm sorry, but I wasn't as emotionally invested in Carl.
Sorry, dude. You're probably listening to this.
But yeah, Carl got hot lead poured down his throat, and his balls, brain, and heart were eaten. So
sorry.
I did feel bad for him, but he was trapped in like sand the whole time.
Okay, yeah. So, oh man, that
and Dark and Raw just like sort of talked to him the whole time and convinced him that his parents sucked and they're evil, and then he had to submit totally.
Yeah, and then he does because Dark and Raw is like really good at sort of the social engineering thing, like you were saying before.
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about the title of the book here now, which is kind of my favorite part of the whole thing that I thought was really great. The Wizard's First Rule. What is the Wizard's First Rule, Paris?
People are stupid.
Brilliant. I love it. Fucking excellent, I have to say.
It is.
That's like the first rule of wizardry is like, people are fucking dumb, bro.
Yeah,
You don't even have to use magic. You just say some shit.
Yeah, you just trick people.
Yeah,
I mean,
you just
honestly,
fucking say some shit and they'll believe you like idiots.
Well, I really liked that as well because I think it's a useful rule for life. I feel like that's humans' first rule. Yeah. Other people are stupid. You know,
if you want to be a wizard. We've had discussions where I've had that there are such things as like wizards in real life, but let's not bring my crazy out right here.
Chris, I think Chris, you already brought your crazy out with that sentence.
Well, yeah, we'll explain maybe later, but like it's not as crazy as it sounds. I've discussed it. Anyway, Wizard's first rule is that people are stupid and that you can convince them of a lot if you just sort of believe in the right way or present it in the correct way.
Well, and just that people will always believe what they want to, or they'll believe it because they're afraid of it.
Yeah. Something like that. But it was a brilliant little plot point that I guess the rest it's sort of the major undoing of Dark and Raw later, in fact. But yeah, so they're in the castle again. They've gotten to Tamarang and they figured out that there's something screwy with the box. They have to go and find it again or something like that.
Yeah, because they're like, shit, it's definitely not here.
Yeah.
Like,
so they eventually meet up again with Chase, who has found Rachel. And they eventually they figure out that Rachel is in possession of the box in the loaf of bread by convincing her that they're not mean people, that they're out to stop Dark and Raw, who Rachel doesn't like. One time, Dark and Raw was in the same room as Rachel, and biting my nails in fear. But
dude, honestly, I was so surprised that he didn't figure that shit out. I was like, wow.
Yeah, like he's supposed to be even better than most wizards, and like because the web that Giller put over the loaf of bread was good enough, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, it's, again, sort of so comically evil that you don't even think about children. You don't think about children as being a threat, or you don't think there's really any threat to you.
Yeah.
And that's sort of his undoing, is that he doesn't think anything is a threat to him.
Yeah.
He lets people live constantly when they really shouldn't.
He lets Richard just walk out of his fucking room. Like, there's the big confrontation between Dark and Raw. Let's skip over to that part because it's about to happen, basically. Because what happens?
No, we gotta get to 100 pages of Sodom over here.
We have to. Yeah, exactly. We'll cut through that because what happens right here after Rachel gives them the box or something like that, or lets them know that they have the box.
Yeah, she goes off with Chase, and then I don't even remember how.
They start to go over the bridge, and there's the whole thing with James the artist, and there's another like weird. Here's a spell that popped up out of nowhere. It's like an invisible wall that shrinks on you, and you have to go and find the original drawing in a cave that the artist made and like
some
alter
of this
it.
shit's so fucking stupid. But anyway.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, oh, this sounds dramatic and cool, so let's put it in here. But there's a loophole in that, like, if you
there's always a loophole.
If you redraw the person that's in the magic painting to look like the person that painted it, maybe they'll get trapped. That's what Richard does in the end.
Yeah. It's real dumb.
When he gets trapped by the artist, but even when he tricks the artist this way, he gets captured by a Mord Sith outside.
Yeah, because
when he tries to use a sort of truth against her, and the thing about a Mord Sith is that if you try to use magic against them, they can then control you with that magic.
Yeah,
you're under their submission. So thus begins 100 pages of solid BDSM torture rape.
Yeah, dude.
That Richard goes under. There's
it's
a whole
really
lot
like 100 pages. I don't think that's an exaggeration. It might even be more than that.
It's probably a little under 100 pages.
It's somewhere between like let's say 80 to 110.
Basically, this Mord Sith Denna has Richard under her control through like can control his sword magic to give him sheer pain. She also has a thing called an agiel that she uses to inflict pain on people. Yeah,
it's basically a rod of pure pain, but you don't really know what it is, if it's heat or cold, or it's just pain.
It's just pure, just unadulterated pain. It was used on her to make her become a Mord Sith because she was literally raped and tortured over and over and over with that agiel that she has become intimately familiar with, and uses it to turn other people into her, become her thralls. Let's say,
and whenever she,
which Richard is under, and basically he is just subjected to constant pain for like weeks.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of like making out with them while he's
with the agiel in their mouths, which fuck, that sounds crazy.
There's like rough sex sessions with the agiel between them.
Yeah, even though they don't
describe it. It's like sort of the build up to it, and then it like sort of fades out or whatever.
Yeah.
And the Mord Sith are under the control of Dark and Rahl, so this is where Richard is brought to Dark and Rahl.
Yeah, Dark and Rahl was the one that sent this particular Mord Sith Denna after Richard because she is kind of the best at what she does.
Yeah.
And the Mord Sith, again, are an order that protects the Rahl.
Yeah.
And Dark and Rahl, of course.
It's not the Rahl. It's like that's his literal last name. It's the House of Rahl.
Yeah, the Rahl is like the person that's... Oh, that's right. The Rahls are like the ones that are in charge of the land called Dahara.
Yeah.
So it's Dahara, the Midlands, Westland.
Yeah.
And Dahara was separated from the Midlands by a boundary, as the Westland and Midlands was. Sorry, I just think we didn't explain that.
Yeah, well, minor detail. We skipped over a lot of stuff here, so there's a whole lot of stuff that we can't get to, and as I mentioned, so you should maybe pick up and read the book if you're really interested in it.
Yeah, you should read the book.
But anyway, Richard gets put in front of Dark and Rahl, and Dark and Rahl is like, you're not a problem. I have the 3 boxes already, or something like that.
Yeah.
Turns out that Richard's brother Michael was a traitor from way earlier, and he was under Dark and Rahl's he was teaming up with Dark and Rahl, and when I guess Chase brought the box to him because he thought Michael would have this army behind him to protect and keep the box, but Michael ends up giving it to Dark and Rahl, and Dark and Rahl's like, I got the boxes already, I know which one will kill me, you're gonna have to help me choose the one that'll make me all powerful instead of the one that will erase everything.
Well, because he knows that Richard knows something about the Book of Counted Shadows.
Yeah.
But Dark and Rahl doesn't realize that the Book of Counted Shadows exists only in Richard's mind.
Yeah, his father found it, like absconded with it from the Midlands somehow. Like, this is really glossed over.
There's literally no explanation.
It's supposed to be like locked under every kind of key, and this dude just gets it because he's that good of a thief or a treasure hunter or something.
It's weird.
And so he basically makes Richard totally memorize it and then burns the book itself. Dark and Rahl doesn't know. He does figure it out, but he
doesn't figure it out.
Until
Richard tells him.
Richard tells him at like the very end or whatever. But when Dark and Rahl brings him to this meeting, he's like, I know you're gonna have to help me eventually. So you know what? You're just fucking free to go, bro. You'll come back. I know you're gonna help me.
Well, because he threatens him he's like, you know what? If you come back and help me, I'll make sure Colin has a comfortable life that a confessor deserves.
Yeah, I mean, comfortable in that she'll be his mate and all that stuff. But yeah.
Because he was like, whatever.
It's the better option than everything being erased. I feel like I would just go for like the everything being erased option if they came down to it.
Yeah, but he doesn't.
So he lets Richard basically go. He casts a spell on him again that just out of his butt that just makes everyone think that he is their enemy.
And
unless,
of course,
unless they're in favor unless they're under the thrall of Darkenral. And they see him just normally. So, the magic in this thing is just real convenient for dramatic purposes. That's basically how you should view the magic in this series is
bullshit.
Convenient for dramatic purposes.
Also known as
if
bullshit.
you're fine with that, you're going to be fine with the magic. But
see, I'm not.
There's always a loophole because let's try to actually maybe wrap this up, even though we're a little bit going under time than what we thought.
Yeah,
It's
we're
only
on schedule.
It's only an hour 13 right now.
We can keep going. We
But
need to keep going. There's more
towards
stuff
the
to talk
end,
about.
they this whole thing happens. Richard goes off for a week basically to try and figure out how he's going to solve everything. He realizes it's kind of hopeless. There's a little side adventure with a dragon whose egg he helps get back. It was a dragon that was in servitude to Darkenral because it had captured its egg.
Which he just fucking figures out.
Yeah, he just kind of magically...
He was like, I remember seeing these guards around an egg. And it's like, no, you didn't. You saw a bunch of guards in one place and you guessed.
Yeah, but, he's a seeker of truth. He has really good instincts, though.
We didn't even talk about Denna, though.
What about her?
About how Richard kind of falls in love with her a little bit?
Yeah, there's a little Stockholm
really
Syndrome thing going on. He actually... There's a thing about the Sword of Truth where, we were talking about how it's motivated by hate and anger. But that's not like sort of his final form of using the Sword of Truth. You can make the sword turn white if you figure out sort of the real way to unlock its power, which turns out to be the power of love instead. Of course, that's the power of love, everybody. The Deus Ex Machina of all Deus Ex Machinas.
Yeah, man.
It's love. It'll get you through everything. And he ends up forgiving her because he comes to understand her pain from how she became a Mord Sith.
Yeah, because basically the way that...
Yeah, go ahead and explain this.
Yeah, so the way that Mord Siths become Mord Siths, every year, every X number of years?
I don't think that matters. That doesn't matter.
Anyway, every so often, Darkenral's people seek out the kindest, sweetest, most good-natured little girls, and they take them, and they subject them to every kind of pain, torture, and rape one could subject one to. They choose the sweetest, most good-natured little girls because they fall the farthest and therefore become the best Mord Siths.
They're even meaner after they've been broken because there's a whole thing about doing the same thing to their mothers so that they're eventually broken of all empathy, and then they have to do it to their dads too.
Yeah,
or something.
they basically not only do they inflict all this shit on the little girls that are in training to be Mord Siths, but
they literally tear apart the family as well.
Yeah,
literally.
They rape and torture the mother in front of them, then they make them rape and torture their dads. And there was one other... and then finally, they get raped and tortured by Darkenral?
Yeah, that's, maybe the last part or something like that.
Well, no, Denna said it was like an honor for her to be taken by Darkenral. Oh, that's right. Because they're supposed to be taken by their trainers.
Yeah.
But then Darkenral took her and basically raped her so hard she's barren.
Yep.
And she considered that an honor because...
So anyway, Richard comes to understand her pain, unlocks his final form of love power with a white sword instead of a silver one.
And instead of I don't know, I thought it was actually kind of shitty that he just kills her.
No, he gives her some sweet loving first. Eventually Denna comes around and she's like, I want to see what it feels like without the pain.
Without the Aegil, and they have some sex.
That's probably the one clear sex scene in the whole...
Yeah, there were a couple of times, yeah.
And then he just stabs her in the heart with his sword eventually because she's accepted it. She's like, I knew this was going to happen eventually. After you kicked that princess's teeth out, hell yes, Richard.
Yeah, he did that while he was being tortured, and so which was supposed to be this amazing feat because
he was sassy even though he was supposedly totally under the control of this Mord Sith Denna.
Yeah. Yeah, which I don't really think is explained by the whole love power thing.
Yeah, it's sort of like like I said, his final form. He unlocks the power of love, and he can... Darkenral lets him go to figure this shit out. He has this dragon side adventure, and then they basically get brought back...
Talking Lady Dragon, by the way.
Yeah.
Talking Lady Dragon.
There's a couple of there's the talking wolf. Brophy! It's Brophy the wolf! Oh, he's a bro. He's Brophy the wolf. He's not even in the book that long. He's 2 chapters, and he's fucking murdered.
Yeah. Well, no, because remember Rachel talks about him way earlier?
Yeah, and then
she's like, my friend Brophy, and then you're like, oh, it's this fucking wolf? Like, what the hell?
And then when the Brophy sees her later, he's like, Rachel, is that you? And she's like, Brophy! And I was like, oh, good, she met a friend again, hooray. And
then Brophy gets fucking murdered.
Yeah,
he's the only good character that gets murdered.
Yeah, he tries to attack someone that's attacking them and just instantly gets fucked up. Like, totally.
Yeah.
It's towards the end of the book, but still, poor Brophy, man, he was a bro. It basically comes to the point where it's at the very end here. It's the first day of winter, which Dark and Raw sort of had to do it by this day, or else like the magic would kill him somehow, even if he didn't.
Yeah, that's none of this shit's explained, but yeah, that's it.
So they're finally coming back. Richard had tried to contact Zed and Kalan before, but he appeared as Dark and Raw to them because of the enemy seeing spell that had been cast on him.
And it was also changing his speech, so he was speaking High Daharan, which why didn't Colin know that?
I don't know.
She knows every other language, but doesn't know Daharan.
She knows Midlands languages super well. She doesn't know Daharan super well, I think. Yeah, but it's just conveniently she didn't know that
I think
thing.
It's kind
There's
of
always
bullshit.
there's the loophole.
I think it's also bullshit that Zed didn't know Daharan either, considering his background.
Yeah.
But whatever.
But yeah, so he tries to contact them, but then he like realizes he can't. They think he's Dark and Raw, so
they try to kill him a couple times.
So he tries to just meet up with Dark and Raw and supersede everything somehow. Yeah. Zed, Chase, and Kalan come into the Garden of Life where Darkin performs most of his rituals, including the whole molten lead child murder eating ballsack thing.
Yeah.
Oh, but this was after basically Kalan goes Super Saiyan.
Yeah, she goes into the Kandar.
The Kandar, which is a blood rage
which is Super Saiyan.
Because she heard Richard got sort of taken by the Mord Sith, so she screamed. She literally screams a bunch. Some energy pops up around her. If her hair had went blonde, it would have been 100% a Super Saiyan transformation.
Yeah, dude, it's total bullshit. Like,
here's the thing. What happens? It's basically supposed to be a thing where, like, it's the final sacrifice of her life energy. Once she goes into it, she's supposed to die after.
Yep.
And she goes and when she meets up with what she thinks is Dark and Raw, which is really Richard, under the spell, she tries to touch him to finally turn him under her command.
Right.
And, as soon as he does that, the real Dark and Raw comes out and it's like, haha, that's really Richard.
Yeah.
I fooled you. But then, like, she comes out of the Kandar blood rage and she doesn't die.
Inexplicably. And Richard isn't taken by her power because
love. Because he already really loved her. So why would this be a problem for relationships with confessors? If you really love them, then it's okay. Zed says it's a thing. Oh, I just didn't say it because if there was ever a seed of doubt, then you can't ever really be sure. So it wouldn't work in the end. So if I didn't say anything, it's the only way to actually make it so that happens.
And his wife was a confessor too. Surprise, surprise.
But yeah, it's just a bunch of this stuff where it's little tiny loopholes that aren't mentioned until after the fact.
Yeah, and which honestly don't make sense. They're not truly loopholes.
This is what happens basically. Richard, who is supposed to now be under the confessor's control, and only telling the truth about things, Dark and Raw uses this as his opportunity to come in and like just put everyone under his submission. Zed is like frozen in place or something.
Chase is frozen in place.
Zed, they're all bound basically.
I forget what happened to Zed.
They're all basically, they can't do anything.
Yeah. Magically fucked. I don't know.
Kalan is supposed to have spent her power, so she can't do it again at this point.
Yeah.
Richard is supposed to be telling the truth, so he tries to get Richard to recite the Book of Counted Shadows so he can do the ritual accurately and pick the correct box so he isn't annihilated. And he supposedly knows which box will kill him.
Yep.
Which is why he was confident before. But there's a conflict in the Book of Counted Shadows that Richard recites. And he's like, are you really telling me the truth? Are you really telling me the truth? I'll cut Kalan's throat. And he's like, no, I'm really telling the truth. I'm under the confessor's touch of the mistress.
Yeah.
How can I lie or something? And then, surprise, surprise, he opens the wrong fucking box.
Because
Wizard's
dumb.
First rule,
Yep.
people are stupid. And Richard had, sort of used the loophole, exploited the loophole in that he didn't even know, but he knew that he wasn't under the confessor's touch, but he pretended to be after in the instant that it didn't happen, I suppose, in order to be able to fool Dark and Raw. So yeah, again, here's the sort of major problem we have with the book, where there's just a whole lot of just magical loopholes that you don't know about. They make sense.
No, they don't, Chris. You just explained how it didn't
I don't
make
see
sense.
why the power of love wouldn't deter the confessor's touch, and why that would mean it's such a problem for a confessor to take a mate. That's true, because if they're true, then apparently the touch doesn't work.
Yeah.
So what's the problem?
And here we go again with the true love bullshit. Like, god damn it.
True love isn't just necessarily a real feeling. It's something that's built. It's a foundation of experiences and troubles and stuff that you've gone through with someone, and a trust that you've built with them. I suppose you could argue that that's really what they're talking about here.
But this makes it seem like I'm talking about true love in the sense that, you know, it's like
a real
true monogamy, like one for one.
Yeah,
that's it, you
yeah.
know, and it's like, oh, God.
I don't buy all that all the way.
Me neither. And I really hate that was a major part of, you know, the end of the book.
Again, the magical loopholes where it's not really explained, and Zed is always a mysterious wizard that just like is always like, you never asked about this, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Or if you had known, the magic wouldn't have worked because intent is a big part of it. Even though, like, how are we supposed to know how anything? I feel like if I read the rest of the series, I would never really know if Zed had something up his sleeve or not, or any or wizard or whatever had something up their sleeve that could fix things or not.
Right.
Because there was always at least a downside to things, I suppose. There was never really just a pure, this is always awesome, let's just use it all the time thing. But you never have a clear sense of how it works.
Yeah, no, of course not.
I suppose that works for some it works dramatically because, of course, you know, you don't know how it's going to work out until the very moment after or something like that. But then that kind of ruins my immersion into the world.
Well, that's
a little
what I
bit,
mean. Like,
suppose.
I get that people are like, oh, it's fantasy, it's not supposed to be realistic. But you know what? You still need a realistic.
I don't even say realistic, just consistent.
Yeah, consistent. Thank you. I think
something that I have a clear framework to understand, and if you can work drama within that, it's much more powerful.
Exactly, because you really feel like you understand what's going on.
Whereas in this one, like, you know that there's probably going to be some magic shit that'll help them out. You don't know how it works. They could pull the magic anti-backwards box of Orden
right. It's like,
out of their pocket and like, nope, never mind. I just didn't say anything about this because the drama. So here comes to where our closing points of the book here, I suppose. We'll have the big argument that I wanted to ask you that we already discussed a little bit in that, is it a terrible book? Even though it uses a lot of fantasy elements that we're used to. It doesn't have like elves and orcs and dwarves necessarily, but it's definitely the hero's journey, which we've seen so many times.
Yeah.
There's the magic sword, the talking animals, and the dragons, and these are useful in that people can have something to hold on to in a fantasy world. Especially like in the D&D campaign that I run, it's not totally original by any means. There's dragons here and there. And,
well, no, but that's for a group of friends. You're not publishing.
Yeah, well, maybe. We'll see. Probably
see.
not. Don't worry about that part. But it's something for people to grab onto. But does that necessarily make it sort of a bad thing? If he still told an enjoyable story, but didn't really branch out the genre a whole lot.
Well, first of all, I already answered this.
Yeah.
Second of all,
well, sorry.
No.
Excuse me, princess.
I'm just saying, you know, I already gave you my answer, but furthermore, the story was enjoyable in some respects. Like I said, I really liked the writing quality. I liked the character development, but it frustrated me in that, once again, love conquers all and all this shit. I didn't enjoy it.
Compassion is certainly a thing that can be a powerful force. You know, it's not maybe not necessarily like true monogamous romantic love a thing, but compassion is certainly a force, I think.
Fine, but I just really wish books could get away from that. We're on book 3, and it's been in every book we've read so far.
Yeah, love is but it is a powerful human force. It's a part of human nature that this is a huge driving factor about why we do anything. I've done a bunch of dumb or stupid or annoying things in the name of I love someone so much that maybe I shouldn't have done or something like that.
I think we all have,
or should have done, or was compelled to do a good thing because I love someone.
Right, but I think art is a way for humans to grapple with these forces, like love. And I guess I just expect more out of people. I guess I expect people to sort of push this and
I do agree
try
that
to get away
it
from
should be looked in a more complex manner where it's like, I want to see a fantasy book or any book that describes love as something that is built over time.
Right.
Like, it takes a long time to really get someone's trust and have them, you know, really be that bonded to you, I think.
Right.
And there's a deeper complexity to it than just like, they're attractive, they're nice to me,
right, and
they're
I
a good
wish,
person, that's it.
Right, and I kind of wish the focus of a story would be a different type of love and not just romantic love. I mean, obviously, Richard and Zed are, have a love for each other, but it's not spoken of in the same way, and it seems like in the
grandfather, by the way, Zed is Richard's grandfather.
Zed literally is Richard's grandfather.
Darken Rahl turns out to be Richard's real father, even though he doesn't.
Star Wars.
Just Zed and Darken have this like little conversation where they're like, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm Richard's grandfather and you're his father.
Yeah, that's right. Darken Rahl.
It's literally just like a little, by the way, and then he explodes and dies. Like that's
yeah. So Darken Rahl is Richard's father. Zed is Richard's grandfather because Darken Rahl raped Zed's daughter, who was a confessor because Zed's wife was a confessor.
Yeah.
I guess
the other thing that we talked about where like everyone is related to each other, it's like soap opera-y or TV series-y in that like he's his brother from here.
But interesting that they didn't kill Richard because he was the male son of a confessor and the son of Darken Rahl.
I don't think that Zed's wife was a confessor, was he?
Yes, yeah.
I didn't pick that up.
She was. That's why when they were like, well, how do you know about this? And he was like, I know about the love thing because, his wife was a confessor and his daughter was a confessor because confessors can only come from female confessors.
He also mentions that Richard is sort of the amalgamation of the Rahl bloodline of controlling hate and the Zorander bloodline.
I almost said Zoolander.
I kind of had that moment a lot in the books too. I was like,
bloodline.
oh, it's Derek Zoolander, the magic wizard.
Jesus Christ,
But he's sort of like this combination of the ultimate hate and love magic. So he, there's a whole ending where like, the whole armies are his now and he's the master of House Rahl, even though
he's Master Rahl now.
He doesn't realize it and like...
he has no idea. For like 30 pages, he's like... well, I don't know, why do they keep calling me that? Blah.
And everyone's there, and the dragon comes down. It's like, look at my egg hatched, is happy. And Rachel's there with the doll in her mouth, which I was very happy about.
Yeah.
And everyone's a big happy ending kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But here's another thing about this book, because like my criticism of Marked in the last podcast was that it was a setup book that didn't do anything to set anything up.
Yeah, I mean...
well, it was just like this really... It was really just a book that's told you all the backstory about anything and had a tiny conflict between two high school girls over the leadership in a sorority, which was nothing. Yeah. And there was barely an arc there that I cared about, especially in the broader context of what might come later in Marked, I suppose.
Yeah.
Whereas this book has a very good rising and falling action. There's room for future things that are good on their own, but if you just read this book and stopped here, it will be a fine story on its own.
Which I think we're doing, because 14 more books of 800 pages.
Yeah, we're going to be reading more books for this thing, and like we have to pick and choose at this point, which is...
yeah, which is...
I'm glad that we had a decent experience this time.
Yeah,
Maybe Terrible Book Club isn't always for terrible books, but...
well, I mean, like we already discussed, this book isn't... it's not in the same realm as Marked or The Overton Window.
Yeah. But we picked it up for different
parts.
reasons, because we want to have this discussion about what's good for a fantasy genre. Do you need to be original to be good? I don't think you need to be original to be good or enjoyable. I think the way you put it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you would prefer to see more originality. You can accept that it's a good story, but there's too much of sort of just not branching out enough, even though there was points of originality that you enjoyed.
Yeah.
Maybe you wanted just something a little more, maybe if the magic was more clearly defined, or...
yeah, there were a lot of, things I've already talked about. Yeah, I mean, just a consistent magic scheme, magical environment, I should say. Things that, again, a focus on romantic love being the greatest power. Could do without that. And
just cynical, Paris.
I'm sorry. I just think that people
I believe people should be cynical. And again, I have the thing where it should be stressed that love, especially, is something built out of experiences together and shared experiences that you've had, and sacrifice and compromise, and really learning about the inner workings of another person instead of just like they're pretty and nice.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Which, I mean, I think Richard and Colin had some of.
Oh, yeah, no, there was definitely...
it was better.
Again, it was probably one of the better relationships in a fantasy series that I've read.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. But, yeah, anyway, it was just too tropey for me. Too many tropes.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think people should read this.
I would agree. It's not a terrible book, as we said at the start here. It's a pretty good read.
It's okay. Yeah.
If you don't mind your fantasy tropey, which I'm sure plenty of people don't.
Yeah, plenty of people don't. Plenty of people think this book is great.
I wouldn't begrudge them that opinion.
Don't read the. Don't read. Don't watch The Legend of the Seeker though. The TV series on which this
we
was
haven't
based.
watched it. We just saw some trailers, but we might have to take a peek at it for a little bit.
If there's some riff tracks, maybe it looks real bad.
I doubt that, but yeah,
it looks really bad.
Nothing else to say here?
No, I think that about wraps it up.
Okay, yeah. Well, so let's talk about some other side stuff here. We finally got some new hosting on Libsyn. You can find us at terriblebookclub.libsyn.com.
Correct. Yeah.
If you want to be able to download our stuff from a reliable host that doesn't, cut off our time or anything like that.
Yep.
Or
we're
prevent
also
us from adding certain types of music. And
right. Yeah. Now
there's an RSS feed that you can get if you just add /RSS onto the end of that URL.
Yep.
We have a Facebook page on facebook.com/terriblebookclub.
Yep.
I believe
we're also
so.
now on iTunes, so you
iTunes,
can subscribe
there's
to us.
a couple of places. Yeah, please start communicating with us.
Yeah.
We would like to hear from listeners, suggestions for terrible books you might have.
You can
what you thought about stuff, what we suck at, if you want to hear some more or something like that. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all this YouTube nonsense and stuff like that.
And we also have terriblebookclub@gmail.com as our email. So
we do. Yeah, please send us any sort of suggestions or commentary. We would love to hear from that.
We'd like to have a larger pool of terrible books from which to choose.
We have a list. We have a list,
but it's a lot of the same stuff.
We could use some more. Feel free to throw any recommendation you have. As maybe eventually you can start sending books to us, but we'll talk about that eventually. If you have a suggestion or if you want to send us something, send us an email at terriblebookclub@gmail.com. Check us out on terriblebookclub.libsyn.com or on iTunes. And if that's it, then I'm putting on my robe and wizard hat, Paris.
I just wanted to make a note. I'm going to be out of the country for a couple weeks, so we're not going to have another episode for
at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah, like 3 weeks, hopefully no longer
Maybe
than that.
We can at least still pick out the next book and I can start reading it.
Yeah.
And this time I'll be done before you are.
Yeah, I mean, I still will be reading a little bit while I'm away, but I have some real books that I'm reading that I'll be reading on the plane and such, so.
Well, this wasn't a real book. This is a fake book.
Yeah, these are my
false
terrible
flag
books.
book.
Yeah, no, I read terrible books, and I also have regular books that I read.
Oh, okay.
I double fist books.
Okay. Yeah, I've certainly been reading more as well.
Yeah.
And with that note, we hope to hear everybody's opinions and comments if they can.
Yeah, feel free to reach out.
You'll be hearing from us soon again.
All right, cool.
See you, Paris.
Bye.